Now, can you all get your mobile phones out and be ready to tweet about this talk? Because coming up on the screen, maybe coming up on the screen will be a Twitter feed. But actually just reminds me that last year I was at a conference in London, and I was with Rachel, who just disappeared out the door.
No, she hasn't.
And the guy who's sort of chairing the conference, a very well-known television presenter, started berating the audience for tweeting whilst they were out there. And everybody stood up in unison and said, what? This is a conference about technology and you're stopping us tweeting. It was quite interesting.
Yeah.
So, can I introduce Andy Mellor, who's the head teacher of a very successful school in Blackpool, and he's here to talk about tweeting. I was speaking to Steve Iredale, who's the president of the NHG this morning, and Steve said, I mentioned that Andy was here, and he said, you've got a good onion there. So you've got a lot to live up to on that recommendation.
Well, I hope this doesn't stink.
So thank you. If I hand over to Andy, and it's about half an hour with conversation at the end.
Yeah. If I overrun, then jump up and down and wave, because I have a propensity to talk. It'd be great if we get a feed up there, because that's what Twitter's about. It's about an online conversation. And I'm not standing up here I'm not a tremendous Twitter geek. I've been using Twitter for about 3 or 4 years now, and bit by bit, my Twitter world has developed to the point where we're using it successfully now, not just in myself, but also within school as well. But I'll come on to that. Those are my details. I'm going to make sure that this presentation is available to anybody who wants it. I'll probably tweet it. I'll probably put it on our school website as well, because there's a lot of links and a lot of useful information within this presentation. And if you are at the point of thinking, and I don't know where people are with their understanding of Twitter, but there are a lot of useful contacts if you're starting off in terms of following people. So that's my Twitter name at the bottom. I do sometimes wonder whether we should wander around with T-shirts with our Twitter names on, just so that everybody knows who we are, because I've been walking around Bet, and I bumped into certain people, and I don't know Dave Mitchell as Dave Mitchell anymore. He's Deputy Mitchell, and everybody calls him Deputy Mitchell. And it's almost as if your Twitter personality actually takes over your actual name and personality. So this is a little bit about how we've used Twitter and how I've used Twitter as a professional development tool over the years we've been using it. If you don't know what Twitter is, it's a form of microblogging, and it's only 140 characters. So I found that really, really useful. For somebody like me who likes to talk, it means I've got to condense everything. So I get it down to 140 characters, and it does make you think very carefully, actually, about how you write things, rather than writing long-winded stuff. It's really useful for attaching links and photos and sharing stuff like that. You don't have to read a huge long document to be able to find the information you need. It's all very easily accessible, and it gives you a huge audience. And the audience is really up to you. You choose the people you find interesting in whatever field you want to investigate, and then you build up your own personal learning network based on that. If you put stuff in a tweet that people think is interesting, they may well retweet that to their personal learning network, and all of a sudden, virally, comments start to spread, and people think, oh, that's an interesting person, I'm interested in what they have to say, and then they may well follow you, or you can follow them. And slowly but surely, you build up your own personal learning network. I was going to put a little slide up here with my PLN, because it's a really interesting one. I was actually putting this together, finished up last night, very late last night, putting this presentation together, and it was really interesting just going through all the people that I follow. You could probably separate them out into 2 or 3 groups. They tend to be educators, anything to do with Preston North End, and anything to do with cricket, and that just about sums me up. But those are the areas I'm interested in. And I get ribbed about this, but I've posted 9,588 tweets. I'm following 505 people because I find it very difficult to keep up with any more than that. My Twitter stream tends to just take me till midnight to deal with. And I've got 1,481 followers. Some people actually wear that as a badge of honour. I'm not really bothered about followers. I quite like it having a platform to be able to say stuff that I find really, really important to share with people. It gets stuff off my chest. It helps me to share a lot of what I believe, and you end up meeting a lot of people who share those values. You also meet people who don't always share those values, and you get some interesting conversations with them as well. I started looking at this, and I thought, well, we better have some theory in amongst all of this. And this is Kolb's 4-stage cycle of learning. And I was looking at how CPD fits into this, and how Twitter might fit into this as well. And basically, it talks about reflective observation, which is what I started to do when I started to look at the Twitter feed that was coming through. Reviewing my understanding, and then thinking, well, maybe there's stuff on Twitter that I can take, and I'm not necessarily going to copy, but I might be able to use it in a different way. So then we experiment to find solutions that are right for our school. Put it into practice, we then reflect, and this model just seemed to fit quite nicely with what I was looking at with Twitter. And obviously CPD isn't an end to itself. It's not about attending a course. It's not about sitting here listening to me. A lot of what CPD is about, what it should be about, is actually then using that to improve your practice in whatever you do, or improving yourself as a person. And I think Twitter allows you to do that. So how can Twitter help with CPD? Some of you will know Mike Shepherd, who's the head at Horseside Academy in Blackpool. And Mike wrote this blog, and this is where the presentation is actually useful for you to have, so you can go away and research some of this stuff. But I was looking around for comments that people had made about Twitter and CPD. And I asked Mike, and I said, why has Twitter been important to you? And he said, read my blog. So he sent me a link on Twitter, allowed me to go into it, followed it into Mike's blog, and he talked about confirm, challenge and enlighten. It allows you to check and moderate your views in terms of the ideas that you might have. And it allows you to go out there and post stuff that you feel is right, but to get some confirmation of that, or otherwise. And it also reassures him that he's not alone. And that's a key component, this business of being alone. In the world that we're in schools, where local authorities are becoming more and more fragmented, schools are becoming more and more fragmented and pulled apart, that notion of being pulled back together again and sharing is really, really important. It also provides challenge and discussion. And if you are closed-minded and you're not interested in taking stuff on board, then Twitter's probably not the thing for you. But there's a lot of stuff out there that really challenges some of the values that you hold and allows you to be able to think about some of those and test some of those ideas out. So it does provide a level of challenge. And it also enlightens. And there is so much out there. Every night when I go through my Twitter feed, and it's the last thing I do before I turn the lights out, if I come across something that I find really interesting, and usually it's one or two things, I'll actually just mail that link to my email address. So I know when I get into my email account the next day, I can just work my way through it. I've got a bit of dedicated headship time, I think they call it, but generally speaking, some free time. I can actually go through and I can research some of the stuff that other people have thrown out there. So it's become, as Mike says here, a part of his professional kit bag. It's for him, the educator's online companion, connecting him to a world of support, challenge and innovation. There was also, I was on Preston train station this morning at about 8:30, and I was tweeting to see if anybody had any last things that they wanted for me to mention. And there was a chap called Kevin Bartle who said, I've done a Storyfy on that, I'll send it to you. So I've got a Storyfy here as a result of tweeting. And he asked the same question a little while ago. And one of these people, John Connor, says, Twitter for CPD, access to the widest range of superb peer coaches on the planet. That's all. And I thought that just sums it up quite nicely, because there are a lot of people out there that you would never know existed unless somebody or Twitter pointed you in that direction. Internationally, these are some of the people I follow. So the presentation from here on in looks at some of the people I follow and the reasons why I follow them. Pasi Sahlberg is the gentleman in Finland who is in charge of the Finnish education system. And he tweets about the Finnish education system. If you know about the Finnish education system, you know it's for a long time been up there at number one in the PISA rankings. And he's called upon now to talk around the world. Now, unfortunately, I haven't got the resources to bring him to my school so I can listen to what he has to say. But I can actually pick up some of the things he's saying on Twitter. And I find that really, really useful. And it allows me to compare the situation that we're in this country with our education system, with what they've got in Finland, and either rule out some of the changes that they've made in Finland, in our country, because culturally it's different, but also to look at some of the things that we might pick up and run with. At EduSum is from Australia, and she seems to travel the world going to education conferences. Now, I'd love our school budget to be big enough to be able to do that, but actually I just piggyback on EduSum, and she tweets all the different things that she's heard at different conferences from around the world. So all of a sudden I'm getting the benefit of all that CPD as she travels the world listening to some of the greatest educational speakers. In the United States, so this is really global, United States, Danielle6849, whose real name is Danielle Hartman, phenomenal bank of resources. Every time I go on, I don't know where she gets them, but a fantastic bank of resources, tools that you can use in school. I mean, we're really big on using Web 2 tools in St Nicholas. And this article, I mean, this was literally what I pulled off last night. This was the latest tweet that was on last night. And that Zeit link there is actually a link to all the tools, because I had a look at it, some of the Web 2 tools that she's recommend that schools look at. You know, I would never have known all of that stuff if she hadn't posted it or tweeted it. Ashley Azzopardi is a Year 5 teacher in Sydney, Australia, and she keeps pushing tweets out as well about things that work with her class. And she's one of those teachers who is incredibly reflective and does an awful lot of research on her own. And Twitter allows you to benefit from a lot of that research with people like this who are prepared to post their learning. So that literally was the link that she'd posted last night, which was, and she'd put great resource to teach empathy to your students. So if you're interested in that, then you've got a link straight away there. Eden Lane, we have had in our school to do some work on Bloom's taxonomy and De Bono's thinking hats, and their stuff is really, really good. They don't tweet a huge amount, but certainly it'd be worth following them, because even if you just follow them, you pick up their website, which then allows you to actually find out more about what they're doing. And I think that's the other thing. If you are thinking, and you're not on Twitter, and you're thinking of going on Twitter, probably the best tip I can give you is when you come to set it up, have a look at where it says biography. And when you come to write your biography, put something that you think sums up why you're on Twitter. Because generally speaking, if people are looking for other people to follow, they don't want to follow somebody who just posts the name and there's nothing about the biography, because it doesn't tell the reader what it is that you're interested in. So drilling down to sort of professional change nationally, those people at the top in bold are some of the people that I follow. Russell Hobby is the General Secretary of the NEHT, and he is involved in meetings around the country all the time with real policymakers. Quite often, I saw him on Sunday at the NEHT Northwest Conference, and he'll talk about having been to see Michael Gove, he's been to see Liz Truss, and he'll post stuff, obviously not the confidential stuff, but he'll post stuff as it's starting to emerge, and that gives you a real up to date hands-on with what's going on nationally. Steve Idale is the president of the NEHT, and Steve does something similar, but if you go to Steve's account, you'll find he has a blog as well. And what he's doing, because he's only president for a year, he's actually putting in, when he's meeting with these politicians and the conversations they've had, obviously some of them are confidential, but he'll give you as much information as he can. Heads Round Table is an organisation of heads who have come together to challenge the status quo with some of the Govian changes that have been put in place since Michael Gove came to office. I'm really interested in terms of what they have to say, because they seem to be quite a powerful group in terms of changing the educational landscape. Maicon Metcalf is a school business manager. Fantastic resource. She's the one that sent me this up-to-date school inspection handbook. Now, we're due an inspection probably any time in the next 12 months. And I've got the Ofsted inspection handbook that was published last year. She posted it and said, here's a link to the Ofsted inspection handbook. And I've actually covered in yellow, she said, highlighted in yellow where they've made changes. How much time is that going to save? So on the train this morning, I was reading through that and just reading where the changes are. And that just saves you so much time. But it also means that I'm up to date with the document that I'm going to be inspected under. And at Ofsted News is another one that's worth following, because obviously whenever they change things, they'll tweet what they're changing. I did follow the DFE for a while, and I got really quite fed up with that DFE because it just seemed to be Michael Gove's publicity department. So I let them know that I thought that was the case, and then stopped following them. I don't think they've missed me, but I'll be interested to see what you think. Now, drilling down still further, these are some of the consultants that we've used in school. And I wouldn't have known where to turn to find the sort of consultants, the people who can help us to make things happen in school. But all of these people are people who've helped us to make things happen in school. So HG John is John Sutton, who runs Creative ICT, and he's the man behind all the blogs that Dave Mitchell uses and other schools as well. He's helped set all our blogs up in school, and our blogs are, if you like, they're the backdrop to all the Web 2 technology that we use. So a lot of the Web 2 technology we use actually sits on the blogs and is embedded in the blogs. So John's been really, really important. And if he's on Twitter, it means that if he's doing something with his blogs or he's updating his blogs, then we get to know about it straight away. Andrea Carr from Rising Stars is always willing to listen to schools about products products she's put out, and we got to we've just bought their scheme. But if there's any questions about it, she's there on Twitter for us to be able to ask. Helen Dakin, similarly from I Am Learning. Those of you that have come across Zoe Ross, I wanted somebody to do some work with us on Google Docs and set up Google Docs for us. Zoe came and visited us, and I picked that link up through Twitter. And those are some of the other people. ABC is a gentleman called Alistair Bryce-Clegg, I think his name is, and he is an early years consultant, and I was looking for a template to be able to do some lesson observations in foundation stage, because obviously it's very different from Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. And he published one on Twitter. He just put a link on, which was fantastic. So that's improved what we're doing, and it's recognising that it's very different at foundation stage. Bob, if you were here about an hour ago, Bob's been talking, and Bob tweets all sorts of things about different groups he's involved in, whether it's the National College. I think he's involved with Toshiba as well, and I've missed a Y off the end there. And Tom Barrett, who I knew before he became famous from Twitter, but he's now working as a consultant for Ewan Macintosh, I believe, out of Melbourne, Australia. And Tom's got lots of really, really good ideas as well about teaching and learning. In terms of pedagogy, At Visible Learning is a Twitter account for John Hattie's group, John is a professor from the University of Auckland, and he's a gentleman who's done lots of studies on metacognition and looking at what works in the classroom, and how important is that. I mean, so much of the stuff around the Sutton Trust, John's done a lot of the scientific work behind all of that. Merlin John, I love following because he comes up with all sorts of common sense on Twitter, and I think sometimes you just need to come back to that. There is a temptation, if you're not careful, to get into gadget lust, as I call it, with technology. It's moving so fast, so quickly, that really we've got to keep coming back to the fact that it's about pedagogy and it's about transformation. It's not about the devices themselves. And that was literally what he'd posted last night. Dylan William is really useful to follow because he's obviously most famous for his assessment for learning, but he's available there with tweets about assessment and about the way that education should be going. And Ken Robinson's there, and occasionally Ken will post you'll know Ken Robinson, but occasionally he'll post a video, and you know, when they come out, it's really useful to get those because when he releases them, they make perfect sense and they're well worth watching. But it gives you a heads up that's there when he's tweeted it. And these are some of the teachers doing great things as well. We've got Dave Mitchell, who you'll be aware of. He's been speaking today, and he's the inspiration behind quad blogging. And I did a talk with him at the SAT conference probably about 2 years ago now, and he's got some fairly compelling data around the way that blogging has improved, particularly level 5 boys writing. So it's well worth following Dave. Bergistra is a head teacher from Bournemouth, who I found really interesting when she was posting some of her comments, because her school is very similar to a lot of the schools in Blackpool in that there's quite a lot of challenge. And so what she was posting was basically day by day what was going on in school and some of the challenges they were facing. She's now been picked up by The Guardian, and she's writing for The Guardian. I've made the link with her through Twitter, and she's bringing a group of Bournemouth head teachers up to Blackpool in March. And it looks like the beginning of a really good relationship between two groups of heads who share similar issues in terms of coastal town issues. So I'm looking forward to eventually meeting her. Abdul Chohan is the director at ESSA Academy, and what he's doing, or he's done with his school, is just phenomenal. And it might not be that we want to turn St Nicholas into ESSA Academy, but it's really interesting looking what he's done in terms of the use of technology, and certainly a paperless school. Dawn Hallybone's another teacher who's based in London. She's definitely got a finger on the pulse. You just have to watch this time of year, because if Wales rugby beat England rugby, she doesn't half rub it in. So it's as well, if they do beat us, to just give Twitter a miss for a couple of weeks. And there's a couple more teachers there doing some great stuff with games-based learning. And it's really interesting to see what's going on in terms of what other schools are doing. Because you might not decide to go down exactly the same route, but you might just prompt that thought process, going back to Kolb's learning theory. It might just prompt a little bit of thought to actually do something like that, but in a slightly different way to the benefit of your children in your school. Great CPD for children. We've recently embraced Twitter for our children at school, and a lot of the classes now at school have their own Twitter accounts, which is really, really good, because it allows children to be able, the staff have been great. This is Ruth, who's my ICT lead at St Nicholas. And what Ruth and other teachers have been doing is been taking pictures of children's work, pictures of them holding their work up, and then tweeting it on Twitter. And then parents can see it. So we've actually got a growing number of parents now following all the school accounts as well. And the children see it because, in terms of, you know, previously if they'd done some work, it would be the teacher who saw it, and that would probably be it. But now they're able to tweet stuff, and parents are seeing it straight away, and then what they'll be doing is showing their friends at work and saying, look at what they've done today, and it's fantastic. So this is what we've done, and we've got a school Twitter feed, which is St Nicholas 14. We've got probably about 350 followers now, and it works really, really well. There are particular times when it works well. When we go to PGL and we take our year 5 and 6 children away for the week, there's a lot of parents who get a bit twitchy about their children because it's the first time they've been away for that length of time. So what we do is we'll tweet pictures of the children enjoying themselves. And we've developed an acceptable use policy which allows us to be able to, what we say is, we'll put the child's initials next to the picture. Nobody else knows, but the parent knows and we know. And it just, I mean, the comments we've had from parents, it's just phenomenal, the feedback we've had. They're really, really grateful. They feel as though they're there and sharing the experience with the children. But clearly they're giving the children the independence that it's all about. We've actually published our journey with technology as a school over the last 7 or 8 years. And our new acceptable use policy, which Ruth's done a lot of work on recently, with the Open University, and it's one of the Open University's case studies that's been launched at BET. So hopefully we'll get a link to that at some stage. And some of the other schools that are up there as well, we're trying to pick as many schools as we possibly can. The Year 6 class is Dave's class in Bolton at Heathfield. But you know, go online and follow us and see what we're doing, because you'll get a real feel for what we're trying to achieve with Twitter with the children. CPD by hashtag. So on a Thursday night, if you fancy getting onto Twitter, I'm not quite sure what time it starts, but UK Ed Chat is a general conversation about education, educational issues, teachers talking with teachers. And somebody said, and when I asked them what Twitter was for them, they said it's like a great big global staff room where you can have those sorts of conversations. And these are springing up all over the place. This is not an exhaustive list. There are other ones that I've found out even today. But some of these are really, really useful places to be able to go to have those conversations. It's almost like a forum. And to be able to share those views, like Mike said, to check some of the ideas that you've got, things you might want to be doing in your school. This is diverting away from CPD a little bit. These are my 2 girls. The eldest one, Eve, is 11 and is at high school now in year 7. And the younger one, Erin, is she's 9, just turned 9. And we went to a football match, and there's a man called Graham Alexander who has played for a number of teams. In his last game, 2 minutes from the end, we needed to score to equalise with Charlton, who were getting promoted, so the pressure was on. He went and scored. Erin jumped up and said, "I'm going to make him a cake," because that was her idea of celebrating. So we went home, and Julie made a cake, and we contacted the football. Well, we didn't contact the football club. We contacted Kaz Alex, who is Graham's wife, on Twitter. And she said, "Oh, fantastic, bring it down to the club and Graham will pick it up." So we did. And this is the other thing about it. You're able to get in touch with people you've never dreamed of being in touch with before. So we went down to the football club, we dropped the cake off. They decided that the girls should have their photo taken with the cake, and it went on the website. So they were telling friends around the world that they were on the website, and they were checking in and having a look at it. They had a photograph with Graham Wesley, the manager, who was absolutely brilliant with them. He then said, "Come to the shop on Saturday morning because Graham's signing some shirts." So we went to the shop, and they got a new shirt with it. Graham signed it and everything. It was just fantastic. And there are stories like that. There's a similar story that Dave Mitchell will tell you about Kevin Davis, the Bolton Wanderers striker, who they contacted through Twitter and who's been into Dave's school. And it just gets you in touch with those people that you would never dreamed previously of being able to get hold of. And I believe, and I looked at lots and lots of pictures of Michael Gove last night, and I thought the one with him pretending to be a space cadet was probably the best one. But I believe Michael Gove quoted one of my tweets as well, which I feel, well, I'm not quite sure how I feel about actually. But I was tweeting about performance-related pay when all those changes came out, and apparently he was speaking with Russell, and he said, "Oh, one of your members said," so Russell told me he quoted it. So it's really quite a powerful place. And these are just 2 quotes from people who've been using Twitter a lot longer than I have. Primary Pete, who's a teacher in Preston, has said, "Motivated me, expanded my ideas, made me look externally rather than narrowly inwards, shared good practice and has made real good friends." And Dave said Twitter has flipped his CPD. It enables him to develop in the way that he wants to, where he thinks his needs are. Because previously it was about attending courses. And much of the course that you would attend, it was a sort of one-size-fits-all. There was no differentiation. Twitter allows you to be able to differentiate your CPD. So you get what you want when you want it. And I think this is so key. You know, the changes that have been made to schools and local authorities, you can become very, very isolated. And Twitter's part of that solution in terms of keeping our schools together. And we've got lots of Blackpool schools who are on Twitter now, which is really, really good because we're sharing ideas across the town. It's about benchmarking ideas and getting to know where there is real expertise. And I asked that question, can you really afford not to be on Twitter? You know, I've had conversations with people about Twitter, 2 colleagues in Australia particularly, and they just don't get it. But I think if you've actually been on it and you've got as much as we've got from Twitter over the years, it's just indispensable for us at the moment. So finally, it really is what you make of it, you know, in terms of who you want to follow. If you follow people in areas that you're interested in, you might end up following somebody for 6 months and they provide nothing for you, in which case you might just unfollow them. But in that time, they may well have quoted or retweeted stuff that somebody really interesting has tweeted. And bit by bit, that social network, that personal learning network develops virally. So it depends on who you choose to follow and what you want to find out. But it's a gateway to a whole new world of opportunity. And that's it. Are there any questions? It's been a whistle-stop tour.
There was so much interesting information. May we have that to put on, have the PowerPoint to put on the Mirandanet website?
By all means. I think, yeah, I think...
I couldn't get it all down in time.
No. Well, it took me a long time to put that together because I literally went through my personal learning network in terms of people that I decided to follow because I had an interest. But I'm still finding people... you know, I put a tweet out to say I'm doing this presentation. Is there anything that anybody wants to tell me about what Twitter's done for their CPD? And there was a secondary geography teacher from Nottinghamshire called John Dexter who said, oh, yeah, there's this. It's been fantastic because it's linked me up with, in a secondary school, I feel so isolated because I'm the only one who's a geography teacher. But it's enabled me to be able to link up with other geography teachers. And the Jog Ed Chat, I think it's called, is geography teachers now linking up with each other around the country and talking about geography, which is fantastic. I mean, previously you'd have those conversations in your own staff room over coffee. This is now one big staff room across the world to share ideas. It's so powerful.
Have you come up with any creative ways to verify CPD that you're completing through Twitter? Because I mean, from your perspective, it's for you. I can understand how it works well. But say if your staff are using it, you probably want some evidence that they're doing the right CPD. And if they come to you and say, "Well, I spent a couple of hours on Twitter," are you happy with that? Do you need some?
To be honest with you, I trust them in terms of the way they use it. If I wanted to, I suppose I could actually go in and look at their account and see who they follow. And I think it's fair to say that just as I follow Preston North End and cricket and all sorts of people who play for the England cricket team, there are some of our staff who will follow educational and pedagogical experts, but there'll also be people who will be, you know, my wife's a teacher and she follows Marks and Spencer's and Next because that's what she wants to know, and she wants to know if they've got something, you know, an offer on or whatever, there's a sale on, and that's how it is. It's what you want, and you make of it what you want. And I mean, Ruth's probably the best person to say in terms of how people have taken it on in terms of teachers.
It's never given to us as a designated CPD session, so you would never say,
no,
you've got a designated hour to go on Twitter. It's just we would do it in our own time.
I mean, everything you said, I think, makes great sense. And if you could find a way to also, without creating a load of painful admin, do some record keeping around it, then I think it would really be
Mm.
powerful tool.
Well, I think one of the things we need to do is probably assess this and for Ofsted's sake, as much as anything, look at the things that have had particular impact in school, because there's a lot of that that's had a particular impact in school, and I haven't really gone into the detail. But, you know, part of it, what I'm trying to create is a team of reflective practitioners. And that reflectiveness I'm trying to model by the fact that I'm using Twitter, and I'll go to the staff with things I found on Twitter. And I have to say, when I first started talking about it, people would say, yeah, okay, fine. He's going off on one. He's into his technology again. But bit by bit, there are people, more staff now are taking it on board. And it's not just teachers as well. It's teaching assistants who are having a look. We've got teaching assistants who are on Twitter now. And they're trying to find stuff out, and then they'll bring stuff into school. And then there's you never guess what I found last night. And that's the way the conversations start to develop, and people then start to have a conversation about what they found, and it might not be exactly what we need, but they'll then have a conversation because they're creative enough to actually build something that's right for our school.
Do you have some rules for your students when they use Twitter?
We use it with the staff, so the children don't use it, because I've told my daughters that they've got to be 13 before they can use it on their own, and that's going to be the principle that we use in school. So none of our children will use Twitter on their own in school. What we do is we don't hide them from social media, because we believe that, just like crossing a road, they need to be trained to use it safely. But we cross that road with them. We don't just let them go and cross the road on their own. And we help to build that sense of understanding about what it can do and the power of it. And, you know, we'll do it with them, so they can actually see how it's done. What happens at home has to be moderated by parents, and we have that within our acceptable use policy.
But there aren't any regulations for the teachers? Maybe criticizing education and politics or something like that?
Well, we've just developed this acceptable use policy, and one of the things that we probably need to have a conversation about is, nobody's done it yet, but you've got to be extremely careful what you post. And there have been times when I've written things on a tweet and deleted it, because I've thought, you know, this is my own account, and on my own account I've actually said these are not the views of my school or my employers. But even so, you need to be really, really careful, because people can trace those things back to you and say, oh, that's the head teacher at St Nicholas. And as soon as they do that, they associate you with the school. So there's a level of personal responsibility that you've got to have. But we've got that within our acceptable use policy now. Any other questions?
I thought it was interesting what you were just describing to Carl about the kind of extra layer of reflection on top of the reflecting that people are doing on Twitter, where you're actually discussing how people have tweeted and how that's helped them to develop. Have you thought about formalising that in any way, either by kind of having hashtags on Twitter where people talk about tweeting, or by using some other way of formalising that? Because it seems like that could go some way towards kind of delivering some kind of formalised CPD activity.
We haven't, but yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't. I mean, we've got staff who are at various levels of understanding with Twitter, and the idea of the hashtag, I think, is that next step on from your tweet, isn't it? And it's about